The man standing in aisle 9, comparing 2 jars of marinara sauce like the fate of the free world depended on it, had been dead for 6 months. I had the receipt to prove it. $41,000 for a bronze casket and a granite headstone at Valley Oaks Memorial. I had a folded American flag from the funeral, because Don had done 2 years in the Army Reserve back in the 90s and the funeral home thought that earned him a flag. I had a closet at home that still smelled like his cologne, because I hadn't been able to make myself give his shirts away. And I had Don, standing right there, holding a jar of marinara sauce. This isn't happening, I told myself. You're tired. You haven't slept right in months. Your brain is doing something cruel to you. But then he set the jar down exactly the way he always did, turned so the label faced out. A habit from 30 years of running his own stores, where a sloppy shelf was practically a personal insult to him, and my cart rolled straight into a display of canned tomatoes. The crash echoed through Gelson's like a gunshot. He turned. For one full second, his eyes met mine, and I watched the blood drain out of his face. Dawn. My voice came out as something closer to a sob. Oh my God. Dawn. He took a step back. Actually, physically retreated, the way you'd back away from someone unwell on a street corner. I'm sorry. His voice came out low and careful, a stranger's pitch wrapped around a voice I knew by heart. I think you have me confused with someone. I knew that voice. I had fallen asleep next to that voice for 3 decades. I knew the small scar above his left eyebrow from a bike accident in 1985, the slightly crooked front tooth he'd chipped on a beer bottle at 22. The way his left ear sat a half-inch lower than his right. I am not crazy, I thought. I buried a body that was supposed to have this exact face. Don. It's me. It's Julie. I reached for his arm. He flinched. Ma'am, I really think you've got me mixed up with somebody else. His tone had gone gentle, almost pitying. The tone you'd use on someone confused in a parking lot. I hope you find who you're looking for. He turned the cart and walked, fast, toward the front registers. I stood frozen between the canned tomatoes and the spilled marinara glass, my heart going so hard I could feel it in my teeth. People were staring. An employee in a green apron was already heading over with a mop and an apologetic smile. I didn't wait for him. I left my cart in the middle of the aisle, and I followed my dead husband out the door. I didn't know it yet, but the woman walking out of that store was not the same woman who'd walked in 20 minutes earlier. He paid cash. No bag, just the one item shoved into his jacket pocket. He walked through the parking lot toward a gray Toyota Tacoma I'd never seen in my life, climbed in, and pulled out onto Van Nuys Boulevard. I got in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I had trouble getting the key into the ignition. I followed him. We went south on Van Nuys, past the boulevard I'd driven 1,000 times for groceries and dry cleaning and Tyler's old Little League games, and the whole time my brain kept running the same loop. You buried him. You watched them lower the casket. You picked the music. And underneath that loop, quieter, something colder. If that's Don, then who did you bury? He turned onto a quiet residential street I didn't recognize, lined with small stucco houses and chain-link fences, and pulled into the driveway of a pale yellow house with a neat little vegetable garden boxed in along the walkway. I parked 3 houses down and watched. The front door opened before he was even out of the truck. A woman came out, dark hair, maybe my age, wearing an apron dusted with flour, and I watched her face light up the way mine used to when I heard his truck in the driveway. She kissed him on the cheek. Not a friendly kiss. A married kiss. Then the screen door banged open again and 2 kids came barreling out, maybe 7 and 9, both screaming the same word. Grandpa. Grandpa, you got the sauce? Grandpa. I sat in my car as the afternoon sun came through the windshield and warmed my face, and I realized I was crying. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere below your ribs. 6 months. 6 months of crying into his pillow. 6 months of a grief support group on Tuesday nights at the Lutheran Church on Riverside. 6 months of telling myself I'd see him again someday. In some other place. And the entire time, he had been 4 miles away, eating dinner with a woman who got to keep him. I took out my phone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but I got the house, the truck, the license plate. 7XK 219. I repeated it out loud twice, so I wouldn't forget it. Then I drove home and sat in my dark kitchen until 2 in the morning, staring at a photo of Dawn from our 30th anniversary trip to Cabo, comparing it pixel by pixel to the blurry picture I'd taken outside that yellow house. Same scar. Same crooked tooth. Same man. At 6 the next morning I called my son. "Mom, it's 6 a.m. Tyler's voice was thick with sleep. "What's wrong? I need you to come over." "Now, it's about your father." A long pause. "Mom, Tyler," my voice came out flat and hard. A tone he hadn't heard from me since he was 16, and I caught him sneaking back in through his window. "I saw your father yesterday. Alive, at Gelson's. I followed him home." Silence stretched out so long I thought the call had dropped. "Tyler? I'm coming over." Something in his tone, not surprised, not confused, just resigned, told me before he ever walked through my door that my son already knew. "Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong." Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Tyler showed up 40 minutes later in gym clothes, looking like he'd rolled straight out of bed. He sat across from me at the kitchen table where I'd laid out every photo I had. He didn't argue that it might be someone else. He didn't reach for his phone to call a doctor. He looked at the pictures for a long 30 seconds, and then he put his face in his hands. "Mom, I am so sorry." The room tilted. "Tell me." My voice came out flat, final, everything now. It came out of him in pieces, like something being pulled with pliers. 2 years ago, going through paperwork at the Tarzana store. He'd found receipts for a second address. Confronted his father. Dawn had broken down and told him the truth. 20 years with a woman named Shayna Castillo, a son they'd had together, now grown, now with kids of his own. Dawn swore he loved us both. Swore he didn't know how to choose. 2 years, I repeated. You've known for 2 years. He begged me not to tell you. The business, the house, you. He swore he'd fix it. That this was temporary. And the funeral, Tyler? The casket I picked the flowers for? Tyler's hands were shaking now too. 6 months ago he told me he couldn't live the lie anymore. That he wanted out. To just disappear and start fresh with Shayna. Filing for divorce meant you'd be entitled to half of everything under California community property law. Half the stores. Half the house. That's what he couldn't stomach. Half of 40 years of my life, I thought, priced out like a fire sale. So instead he staged his death. Tyler nodded, miserable. There was a man. Older guy, no family. Terminal, dying anyway, up near Cedar Glen, where Dad used to go fishing. Dad offered him money for his family, so it would look like an accident took both of them off the mountain road. The other man's body came back as Dad's. Closed casket. Nobody questioned it because the medical examiner's office matched it to dental records Dad had already swapped out years before, when he got that root canal redo. He'd been planning this for months. I felt something rise in my throat. You let me bury a stranger. I didn't know how to stop it without losing you both. And the stores? My voice came out strange, distant, like I was listening to someone else ask the question. 3 Dearborn pool and spa locations. Who owns them now? Me. As his only heir, they transferred to me automatically when Tyler stopped himself. When the death certificate was filed. How much, Tyler? He wouldn't look at me. The stores are worth around 2.8 million combined. I sold the Tarzana location 4 months ago for 600,000. And what was I supposed to live on? The house. And Dad set up a monthly transfer. $1,200 a month. $1,200. Less than what I used to spend on flowers for the shop windows back when I still had a career, before I gave it up to help him build his. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the tile. Get out. Mom, I need you to leave my house right now, Tyler, before I say something I can't take back. He left. I sat alone at that table with 30 years of photographs spread out like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's exactly what it was, and I made myself a promise. I was going to find out everything. And then I was going to take every single thing back. By Tuesday, I had hired a private investigator named Frank Ruiz, a retired lapsed detective who worked out of a cramped office downtown near Olympic Boulevard. I told him everything: the grocery store, the yellow house, the license plate, the funeral that buried a stranger. I didn't mention Tyler yet. That card I kept in my pocket. Give me a week, Frank said, sliding my deposit check into a drawer. I'll get you everything. Bank records, property records, the works. While I waited, I drove past that yellow house in Van Nuys more times than I'd like to admit. Parked half a block down in a baseball cap and sunglasses like some kind of amateur spy. I watched the rhythm of their life. Shayna gardening on Saturday mornings. The kids racing bikes up and down the sidewalk. Don, or whoever he was calling himself now, leaving for work every weekday morning in that gray Tacoma. Toolbox in the truck bed. A locksmith. My husband, who'd built 3 retail stores from a single rented garage, was working as a locksmith under a fake name, living in a 4-bedroom house that wasn't even in his name. Frank called me the following Tuesday. You're going to want to sit down for this. I drove to his office and he slid a thick folder across the desk. Your husband's living under the name Gary Holt. Documents are solid. Too solid for an amateur job. Birth certificate's a real one. Belonged to an infant who died in Bakersfield back in the 60s. Somebody sold it to him. I felt my stomach drop. Keep going. He opened 3 separate accounts 7 years ago, before the funeral. Mrs. Dearborn, under the Holt name. Total deposits across all 3, $1.9 million. He's been quietly moving money into that identity for years. This wasn't a 6-month plan. This was a decade in the making. A decade. While I was helping him pick paint colors for the 3rd store. While I was hosting his employees for Christmas parties. While I thought we were building something together, he was already building his exit. There's more. Frank turned a page. Phone records. 6 months of calls between the Holt number and your son's cell. 43 calls. Some over an hour long. Before the funeral. During it. After, I already knew, but hearing it confirmed in black ink felt like a second betrayal layered directly on top of the first. One more thing, Frank said, more gently now. The house in Van Nuys isn't his. It's in Shayna Castillo's name, bought 22 years ago. To her, near as I can tell, Gary Holt has always just been Gary Holt, a widower she met at a hardware trade show. She has no idea who she's actually been living with. I left Frank's office with that folder clutched to my chest like it was the only solid thing left in the world. That afternoon, I called a divorce and fraud attorney named Dana Whitfield, whose office sat on the 8th floor of a glass building in Encino. She read through every document without a single interruption, and when she finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly. Mrs. Dearborn, this is one of the most serious cases of marital fraud I've seen in 15 years of practice. We're talking identity fraud, concealment of a death, insurance fraud if any policy paid out, and depending on what your son knew and when, accessory after the fact, at minimum. Possibly conspiracy. What about the stores? The money? Under California community property law, everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50, regardless of whose name it's in. And that includes the businesses your son inherited under false pretenses. Since your husband isn't actually deceased, there was no legal inheritance. Those transfers can be challenged and reversed. She tapped the folder. If even half of what's documented here holds up, you are entitled to a substantial portion of everything. The original business value, the money he diverted into the Holt accounts, and likely punitive damages given the deliberate, prolonged nature of the deception. And criminally? Your husband is looking at real prison time. Your son's exposure depends entirely on how much he knew and when he knew it. She studied me. Do you want to pursue charges against your son as well? I thought about Tyler at 6 years old, asleep on my chest. I thought about Tyler at 27, telling me he'd known for 2 years and said nothing while I sat in a grief group crying over an empty casket. I want the truth out. My voice was steady now, certain, all of it. Whatever that costs him. Dana nodded slowly. Then here's what we're going to do. The plan was simple, and it made my skin crawl. I would invite Tyler to lunch, play the forgiving mother, get him talking, get him comfortable, and record every word. We met that Thursday at a restaurant on Ventura Boulevard with a view of the hills. Tyler showed up looking like he hadn't slept in days, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. Mom, thank you for calling. I've been so worried you'd never talk to me again. I've had time to think. I kept my voice gentle, my purse open on the table beside me, the small recorder Dana had given me already running. I understand you were put in an impossible position. His face crumpled with relief. I wanted to tell you so many times. I just didn't know how. Tell me again. My tone stayed soft, encouraging, from the start. I need to hear it to make peace with it. And he did. All of it. Again. In detail. The receipts he'd found. The confrontation. His father's tears and promises. The dying man near Cedar Glen. The $50,000 paid to that man's estranged niece. The staged accident on the mountain road. The swapped dental records. The sealed casket Tyler had insisted I never look inside, because the impact had supposedly been too severe. A lie I had believed completely. Because why would my own son lie to me about something so cruel? And the stores? I prompted. I know it was wrong, Mom. I should have refused them. I should have told you everything the second I found out. He reached across the table for my hand. Can you ever forgive me? I let him hold my hand for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for the recorder to catch it. Then I pulled it back. I need time. I let the words settle in the air between us. But thank you for being honest with me today. I paid the check and left him sitting there, looking almost lighter, like confession had washed something clean. He had no idea what he'd just handed me. That recording went straight to Dana's office. By Friday afternoon, she had filed the complaint with the Los Angeles County District Attorney. By Friday evening, an assistant district attorney named Carla Espinoza had opened a formal investigation. This moves fast once it's filed, Dana told me on the phone. Within 72 hours, your son will likely be brought in for questioning. Your husband, Mr. Holt, or Mr. Dearborn, whichever name we're using today, that situation is more complicated, since legally he's still deceased. We'll need to first petition to vacate the death certificate before any criminal charges against him can move forward. Do it. There was no hesitation left in me. Vacate all of it. I want him to have to stand in front of a judge as himself. Once we start this, Dana said, there's no quiet way to stop it. I know. Are you certain? I thought of the casket. The flowers I'd chosen. The flag they'd folded and handed to me like it meant something. The Friday nights at the grief group, crying over a man who was 4 miles away eating dinner with grandchildren I never knew existed. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Monday morning, 2 LAPD officers showed up at Tyler's apartment in Studio City. Dana texted me the moment it happened. He's in custody. No resistance. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and cried for an hour, because some part of me was still his mother, and some part of that mother would always grieve the boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder, even while the woman I'd become couldn't forgive what he did to her. Tyler's wife, Ashley, called that afternoon, sobbing. "How could you do this to him? He's your son. Ask him what he did to me first." I hung up before she could answer. By Wednesday, Dana had filed the petition to vacate Don's death certificate, built on Frank's documentation, the Holt identity, the financial trail, the fraudulent dental match. A judge granted an emergency hearing. The certificate was vacated within 5 days. Legally, on paper, in the eyes of the state of California, my husband came back to life, which meant he could finally be charged. I asked Dana for one thing before the warrant went out. I wanted to deliver the news myself. I drove to the yellow house on Saturday morning and parked out front for the first time, instead of half a block away. I walked up to the door I'd watched from a distance for 2 weeks and knocked. Shayna answered. Up close, she had kind eyes and flour on her hands again, like she was always baking something for those kids. "Can I help you? I need to speak with Gary." My voice didn't waver. "It's important." She called over her shoulder, and a moment later he appeared behind her in the doorway, and I watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Julie." His voice cracked on my name. "Who's Julie?" Shayna asked, looking between us, her smile fading into confusion. "I'm his wife." I looked straight at her, steady, his legal wife of 30 years. "This man's name isn't Gary Holt. It's Donald Dearborn. He faked his own death 6 months ago to leave me and disappear into a life with you." Renee's face went white. That's not— Gary, tell her that's not true." He gave no answer. The silence said everything. "You used a dying stranger's body to fake your funeral." My voice didn't even shake. "You let our son lie to me for 2 years. You let me cry myself sick over an empty casket while you ate dinner 4 miles away." "Julie, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. There's only what happens next." I handed him the folded papers Dana had prepared. "You're being charged with identity fraud, insurance fraud, and concealment of a death, among other things. Your accounts are already frozen. Tyler's already in custody. And Shayna?" I looked at her, and for one strange second I felt something almost like pity, because she was a victim in this too. Just a different kind. "Your marriage to this man isn't real. Gary Holt doesn't exist. You were never legally married to anyone." She turned to him, tears spilling over. 20 years, Gary. 20 years, and I don't even know your real name?" I walked back to my car and didn't look back, even when I heard her start to scream at him on that porch. The case moved faster than Dana had predicted. Tyler took a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation, 18 months, with the possibility of release in 12 for good behavior. Dawn was charged separately. Without Shayna's support, without access to a cent of the frozen accounts, he couldn't afford more than a public defender. The DA's office, fueled by the sheer audacity of a decade-long plan involving a real human being's death, pushed hard. He was sentenced to 6 years. The civil case settled 4 months later. Dana recovered the full value of the original business, $2.8 million, split according to California community property law, along with the $1.9 million he'd hidden in the Holt accounts, and the funds Tyler had pocketed from the Tarzana sale. After legal fees, after everything, I walked away with just over $2.1 million and the house in Sherman Oaks, free and clear. I visited Tyler twice in the first 6 months. The third time, I brought him a photograph from his 8th birthday. The two of us, covered in cake frosting, laughing. He cried so hard he could barely speak. I don't know yet if our relationship survives this. Some days I think it might. Some days I'm not sure I want it to. I never visited Dawn. 14 months after that day at Gelson's, I stood in the doorway of a small flower shop on Ventura Boulevard, with a freshly painted sign overhead, Dearborn and Bloom. I'd gone back to the career I gave up 30 years ago, the one I'd traded for a marriage built on a foundation that turned out to be sand the whole time. A reporter from the local paper asked me once, for a small piece on the case, what I'd learned from all of it. I told her this: dignity doesn't have an expiration date, and it is never too late to demand the truth, no matter how many years you've already lost to a lie. I believe that more today than I did the day I buried a stranger and called him my husband. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.